Welcome back, everybody. America's Mom here today. It is going to be an interesting one today. We're going to do things a little bit different. We are going to be assessing and evaluating some of the footage from the Tina Peters sentencing trial. And as many of you know, I came from Mesa County. I was heavily involved in that whole situation. My home was raided by the FBI in November of 2021. My family has had a mighty heavy cost of our own just because I was a concerned citizen asking questions about elections. We're going to really get into it today. And I am bringing somebody into this conversation that nobody's talked to. And he was right there along for everything that happened, everything that went on, watching it and observing it from a very different perspective, a criminal justice perspective. District Attorney Dan Rubenstein thinks he's the only person who has a critical criminal eye for what has happened here. The only one who knows the law and understands the legalities of these issues, and maybe Robert Shapiro, the Attorney General's little henchman. But there's other people who've watched this case, who watched it in real time happening, and have a very different perspective and a very different view, not to mention the way that the criminal justice system works and functions even outside of the Tina Peters trial, which I'll share a story about that later on when one of the times that Tina was Clerk Peters was incarcerated at one point, put in jail at one point. So I'm I am doing this today because a lot of people are asking more questions now that they understand what's happened a little bit better. We're seeing massive push for this story to get out by people who are not involved in politics, who have massive followings, and Tina Peters' story is getting out there. And the thing that they wanted to bury the most, which was the Secretary of State, Jenna Griswold, was deleting election files on the Dominion voting machines through her quote trusted build county by county in the state of Colorado in 2021. That's the story that Dan Rubenstein has worked so hard to crush. That Robert Shapiro, Attorney General Phil Weiser, Secretary of State Jenna Griswold, and this judge, Matthew Barrett, have worked so hard to try to bury and not allow the public to hear anything about it. So, my guest is actually my husband. He was here watching all of this happen and unfold. And I'm just thankful that he's coming on. The Mister is joining us today on America's Mom here on Patriot TV. Thank you very much for everything.
Hey, well, it's really good to be here with you. Crazy times we live in, isn't it?
Well, but is it so great? I mean,
Well, maybe it's always been this way. As the saying goes, there's nothing new under the sun.
mm,
I think we've always lived under tyranny as long as mankind has had governments in place. You know what's interesting? I don't know where you want to go with this, and sorry, I'm just jumping right in, but
yeah.
God warned Israel when they wanted to be like all the other nations and have a king rule over them and live under this monarchy. He's like warned them. He's like, "You guys aren't going to like this. Are you sure you want to live like this?" And they said, "Yep, we want to live like this. Let's do it." And I think that we're an extension of that. And we're seeing this play out not just in the Western world, but everywhere in the world, probably for most of the history of the world. We're living in a tyrannical system, and us who are want to be free people are trying to navigate through it and figure out how do we get out from under this. And this is another clear example of tyranny silencing people when they don't like, when the monarchy, or however you want to frame it, doesn't like what somebody's saying. They silence them any
Mm.
which way they can.
Mhm. Yeah. And this is I mean, this is literally what happened. And we're going to see it in some of the comments that are made as we review the videos together today. So I want to encourage everybody to please share this out as you're watching. If you're watching live right now, please hit the share button, share it to your stories, share it on X, on YouTube, share this out everywhere because the analysis that we're bringing is a firsthand account analysis. And so when we're talking about the testimonies that we're going to review in just a minute here for the sentencing of Clerk Tina Peters, we're talking from firsthand, not from word of mouth, not from reading articles. We were there. We know exactly what happened. I think one of the most disparaging issues, disparaging, yeah, issues that has come up through all of this was the attempt to make a woman Clerk Tina Peters look crazy so that she could be silenced. This is the same ploy that's used in the entertainment industry. It's used in the political world. It's used, everywhere. Just make them look crazy, and then nobody will listen to them. And when Clerk Peters, you know, eh, we're, when Clerk Peters realized after the 2021 municipal election, everybody thinks this is about the 2020 election, Trump's big lie.
Right.
Can we start with that first? So let's start with that first. So this has not been about the 2020 election. None of it. Mesa County, Colorado was not about the 2020 Trump's big lie, blah, blah,
Yeah.
any of that. Not at all. Let me be clear about that. It
Yeah.
was never about Donald Trump and his stolen election in 2020, which I do believe was stolen, even more so now because we've seen the reports, the cast vote records.
Yep. In
But
fact, can I throw something in there?
Please, and
N-
and actually, I want you just to share with everybody what was your life like before all of this started? What's your background and the perspective you're going to be
Yeah.
speaking from today?
Well, not only was the 2021 issue in Mesa County not about the 2020 national election, but also you had a clerk in 2021 who believed that there was not voter fraud in Mesa County where this all took place. She started out believing that the votes were secure and there wasn't cheating going on. And it wasn't until so let me just say that that's the framework that she started with. She wasn't starting from a framework of, oh, everything's a conspiracy and everything is voter fraud and everything's she was starting from the other spectrum. And then she was presented with evidence, and the further down she went, the more she was convinced after having experts review things. She was convinced of that. So yeah, and my perspective is, I mean, I come from a criminal justice background. I come from working in Colorado judicial. Interestingly enough, as many as many people know, I was pushed out of my career in judicial for a lot of different reasons, and we could go down that. If you wanted me to talk a little bit about that today, I could. But I was pushed out of my career in 2022, really starting in 2020 with all the pandemic nonsense and the things going on. And the more outspoken I became, the more I was pushed out. But I come from a career in spending much time in court, much time in judicial, much time in this system that we're watching take place, where you're seeing this sort of this unholy alliance between judicial and DAs and other government officials, elected officials or bureaucrats who team up together, and they're all sort of, it seems to me that they're all best friends, and they,
Or
they
seems
team
that
up
way.
to, yeah, it sure seems that way. And it seems to me that they're teaming up to just make sure that they silence people who are questioning the system, questioning authority, questioning the king, right? Not kissing the
Mhm.
king's ring, so to speak. And we're seeing that happen time after time after time again. The important thing to realize from my experience, my perspective, and working in the system, is that you can frame things any way you want when you're working within your own house. I mean, this
Yeah.
is their house. This is their system. You think of judicial and the criminal justice system as this umbrella, and we're all like positioned under here, but it's their umbrella. And so they get to, in a sense, make the rules. It's
Yeah.
their language we're speaking. When you enter into judicial courtroom, a lot of people don't understand this. You're actually speaking another language. It's legal language. You're not speaking you're not speaking like we're speaking right now anymore. And so people don't get this. And when you enter into this system, you're entering into a system that they are controlling, and they control every facet of it. And we need to understand too, these people are having uh, we'll call it under the table conversations and
Yeah.
things going on that you don't just see in the courtroom.
Yeah.
So when they put their mind to something, and you have a number of different facets of the system working together in coordination with each other, in coordination,
Yeah.
they can accomplish anything they want. They can do anything they want. They can frame things any way they want. They can decide that certain evidence will be presented or that certain evidence will be withheld. They can frame a case how they want to frame it, especially when you have a judge who's he's basically administration in this courtroom. He's deciding what gets to be shown, what gets to be withheld, what gets pushed under the table, things that might look good for the defendant, he may not allow to be presented in court. This happens a lot more than we'd like to know. It very obviously, I mean, I don't even think there's any question about it. People that actually watched the trial for Tina Peters, there's
Oh,
no question that there was evidence purposely withheld that could have changed the outcome of this in favor of Tina.
one thing right away that, not to interrupt at all, but one thing right away that people did not know was that Andrew Peters was the attorney for the Woods. Who's Andrew Peters? Only the lifelong best friend of District Attorney Dan Rubenstein. Only the lifelong best friend of District Attorney Dan Rubenstein. How do I know this? Because I used to work at Bennett's Barbecue, and he and Andrew would come in all the time because one of their dads owned Bennett's Barbecue and had funded both of their colleges for law school. I mean, when I learned that, and this is just a little bit of tea for you guys, because we're going to share the Woods's comments if we have time. I think we may. I think it's important. I'm not going to run away from what they've said. I went to them when I realized there was an attorney shift because the attorneys they had would not communicate with the other attorneys. And so they said, we want a different attorney. And I didn't know who they had hired. And they hired Andrew Peters. When I found out about that, I called them and said, do you realize who your attorney is? I drove down there to talk to them and say, do you know who this guy is? I know who this guy is. And I can guarantee you everything you're telling him, I guarantee it. He's telling District Attorney Dan Rubenstein, and they're building a net around you, and they're going to trick you into believing that you've committed a crime. And they smiled and laughed. They're like, no, he's the greatest. He's just working on our behalf. Up until that time, everything was fine. Everything was fine. And at some point, the trickery began. And they began feeling, I believe this is what happened. They began feeling threatened. They began feeling that their life was insecure. They began feeling that there was going to be something bad happen to them, although Gerald Wood never committed a crime. So keep that under your hat, folks. And what you're
Well,
saying about them all being best friends, partying together, you know, barbecues together, all the things, and making deals together. Prove me
just
wrong.
as an example, I mean, because I mean, I have firsthand experience of seeing these things. I was
Yeah.
working in the system for as long as I did,
In
and
that
really,
district, even.
yeah, in that district and also in another district in Colorado. But I'm thankful, as hard as it's been, to be out, because once you're out and looking in, you're like, oh, I'm not sure if I like who I was becoming
Mm,
while I was in there, because it's really easy once you're a part of the club. It's really easy just to go along to get along, and you're comfortable
mhm,
in your position. I think that's what these guys do. I know a lot of these guys, I know a lot of people that were involved in this case and have been involved in the system that I don't think they're necessarily bad guys or women or whatever. They started out good, but you stop questioning the system once you're in it, and it's designed in a way where it's this snowball effect where your power becomes bigger and bigger, and the more you roll down the hill of the system and you keep going, the more self aggrandizing it is, and you feel like you're really something, and then pretty soon you're a judge. And once you're a judge in the system, as we saw in this Tina Peters trial, you are anything you say is pure gold. You basically have no faults, you have no flaws, and you control everything. And the kind of thing we're working with, I mean, when I was working in judicial during COVID, during the lockdowns, you're having judges, police, attorneys gathering together, 75, 100 people in the courtroom for after hours parties, drinking alcohol, not wearing masks,
oh,
living it
but
up
shut the bit oh, but then
while
shut the
we're
businesses
shutting
down.
down trials, waiving people's rights, or not allowing people their right to a speedy
Mm,
trial and all those things because of the scary COVID, and because judicial is so benevolent, they're like, well, we just can't. We can't move forward with trials, and we have to shut down courts and things like that because of the scary COVID. They're having parties for a judge's, retirement or for whatever, who knows what, while they're
Is
not
is
following
that
any of
when
these rules.
you
But
is that when you really began to kind of question what you're doing?
there were a number of times, especially starting in 2020, where I felt like I felt like my soul was oozing out of me. I just felt like when you're at a work meeting, doing a job where in my job, in order to receive the badge I did and the authority as a government official that I received, I had to raise my right hand and swear that I would uphold the Constitution of Colorado and that of the United States. And
Mhm.
then when I'm at a work meeting and I bring up the Constitution, and maybe we possibly violating people's constitutionally protected rights by some of the medical mandates that were happening at that time. If I bring that up and then I get pulled aside and I say, hey, they say don't bring up the Constitution in our meetings. I start to
What?
question
What? Think
what am
about
I
that.
what am I living in here? Yeah, what am I working in? Who am I becoming? When you can't talk about you can't question like the medical data, the medical science. You can't even question it with your own medical research or your own doctors and scientists that come out saying otherwise. When you can't question it, then you start seeing things like the parties, and then you start seeing people be silenced. And I saw bits and pieces of it because working in criminal justice, working in judicial, you see some bad people. There are some bad people, the really bad sex offenders, the domestic violence offenders, the drug dealers, the people literally out there ruining lives and hurting children and hurting innocent victims and all
Yeah.
that. I get it, and I understand that, and many times, of course, I'm on the side of we need to put these people away. But then you also see bits and pieces here and there while you're working, like where it doesn't seem like a real crime was committed, but you still have the entire system working against someone to put them away, and you're like, I don't know about this. And you
You know
begin to
what?
kind of pull back and step aside and say, hold on a second, let me start. I'm going to question what we're doing here and just make sure we're on the right side, the moral
Well,
side.
you're definitely not allowed to question. We're up on a break right now. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to be right back. We are here with Neil Bishop, the Mister from America's Mom and the Mister live today, talking about the Tina Peters sentencing trial. We're going to be coming back with the Dr. Frank video in just one moment. All right, everybody. So here we are again, dealing with a breakdown in our delivery system in America, whether or not we're going to get our stuff, whether it's going to come on time. We have natural disasters, we have port shutdowns, we have unions going on strike. And worst of all, we're still getting the majority of our products from a country that hates us. So I have a solution. Friends, for the last 2 years, I have been shopping with an American manufacturer. It's made all of the difference for my family, both in our supplements, our personal use items, because they have over 500 different products that you can use that you already are using actually every single day. However, they have no hormone disruptors, no endocrine disruptors, no toxins, no dyes, nothing that will kill you, just all of the great impact that you want. You want things that work for you. You want things that are going to make a difference in your health and in your family's health. You can find them all here at shopwithpatriots.com. It's that simple. Go there. You're going to get some information. A great person is going to reach out to you. Reach out back. Do not ignore their call, you guys. These are wonderful people who are part of our incredible movement. They're just like you and I. They love this country. They want to support American manufacturing and American made goods. Most of all, they don't want their families to be poisoned by woke big box stores and the CCP. So go to shopwithpatriots.com, sign up today. We're going to get you more information and you can start shopping today. All right, guys. So we're talking about the Tina Peters sentencing. It seemed like a trial because the judge was literally arguing right back with people. Judge Matthew Barrett. I've never actually seen that, but again, I haven't spent time in courtroom. So is it normal? Is it normal for a judge during a sentencing here testimony like that for him to start arguing with people?
Not from my experience at all. Normally, people are just given their time, and the judge is not the fact checker during somebody's time, especially in sentencing. Somebody's life is on the line here. This is really serious, and people want to have a say, whether there's true victims or whether there's people on the defendant's side who want to speak for the defendant on the defendant's behalf. You need to let people have their say. It seemed to me that the judge was acting as fact checker. Now, in
Mm,
my uh, analyzing what happened, it seems like the judge was consistently interrupting those who were speaking on the defendant's behalf while not
yeah.
interrupting those who were speaking against the defendant and asking for, her to be, strung up and tortured and sent to prison for 1,200 lifetimes and all this stuff because of the awful things that she did. It's really interesting. So, Dr. Frank specifically, when he was giving his testimony, he was interrupted a number of times by the judge. The defendant specifically, Tina Peters, was interrupted a number of times. It's almost like, let me get you off your
Mhm,
let me get you off balance. Let me make you look
mhm,
like you're not credible. And he tried to do that, and it's hard to come back from that because again, you're under they're in their house.
right.
You're in their system, so they're
Okay.
controlling how this stuff looks. And I want to just give an example of how you can frame things a certain way to make it look good or bad against somebody. One example is, and this came up during I think it was during the sentencing, when Tina was arrested. Remember, she was arrested numerous times, but one of
Mhm.
the times I believe she was charged with resisting arrest. And it says that
Oh, the
she was
bagel shop.
kicking the officer or whatever. Yeah, it
The
was.
bagel shop. Yes.
That's framed a certain way based on how you want to make it look. And if you're in control of the narrative, you can just say, "Oh my goodness, Tina Peters assaulted an officer, was kicking and screaming and all these things." If that's framing it a certain way that to make
Yeah.
yourself look good, or to make it look like the story that you want to tell, the picture you want to paint. The other
Yeah.
side of that is, who wouldn't, in their right mind, if officers come up and grab your tablet or whatever it is out of your hands, grab you by the wrist, you don't know what's going on, they're putting you, I would automatically, it's a knee jerk reaction to
Well, and
resist that.
do you mind if I add just the rest of the story to that story
Oh,
that the
sure.
public, doesn't know and never hears about? Tina Peters, Clerk Peters that day had just come from the courthouse. They had just come from being where all these officers were, who ended up following her over to the Main Street Bagel to embarrass her, shame her. And not only that, but there was a reporter there who was all prepped and ready to go who captured it on video. I mean, wow. Like they didn't
Yeah.
know what was going to
How
happen. They came
coincidental.
provoking. Michael Struy, of course, the investigator for Dan Rubenstein's office, the at least competent person in humanity. They followed her over. They had all the time in the world to approach her at the actual courthouse. They could have done it right there, and they didn't. She was there for well over an hour. They were all there. All the same officers
Yeah.
that followed her from there. They were all there. But
So
that's
many of
not what
these
they were
incidents,
after.
it's true, and I mean, obviously, we, especially sheriff's department, are so respectful about what they do, the job they have to
Usually.
do.
Mhm.
When police, when law enforcement are working under the Constitution and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, we respect that very much. But again, so often they can set up scenarios, and we've seen this happen time and time again. We have federal agencies setting up a scenario where they know somebody's going to try to defend themselves, and they
Mhm.
shoot the person. They shoot them, and it comes out later that whole scenario was set up. So you see that time and time again. I mean, even talking about what happened with us,
Yeah.
I didn't know who's banging outside our door when the FBI comes. I had no idea. We have no criminal history. We had no violent history. There's no reason for them to come and raid our home and break our door, literally break our door and leave it for us to fix over the next number of days without having a
You
door to be able to
worked
close in our
for
house and all that.
Colorado State
I,
Judicial.
many of them knew me. I worked there. They could have sent two people and said, "Hey, we have a warrant for your phone and your computer, and what are we going to do?" I mean, literally, they knew that. I really believe that they tried to set up a
Right, I
scenario
think.
where
Mhm.
we react. Thankfully,
Yeah.
I'm not sure why, but thankfully I didn't. I think I would have been justified to defend ourselves because I don't know who's
Mhm.
out there. There was
Yeah.
no bad. I have no idea. They
Yeah.
didn't introduce themselves. I mean, what are we supposed to do? So
And I
So
just want to point out, you were the diffuser in that situation, which is also very disturbing
yeah, trying to
because
calm
you've
them
got,
down. Yep.
yeah, you've got a dozen or more FBI agents. You've
Yep.
got Michael Struy, who thinks he's King Kong Commando, won't show the warrant, never, does not show any respect or regard for law-abiding citizens. You have the police department there. I mean, it's just a huge show, and I think
Yeah.
I appreciate that you're pointing that out, that they set up scenarios hoping for natural human reaction to happen. And that's
Yep.
what they did. They did that to Clerk Tina Peters. They
Many
set up
times.
situations trying to make her look crazy. And I'm telling you, she didn't have the fortune of having a husband like I do, who's, my rock. She didn't have that. And we chose to be there every step of the way throughout all of this because I believe that, and I've said it over and over, I've said it since 2018. When you have elected officials, elected representatives, right? They're supposed to be representing us. When you have elected representatives who will do what is in the best interest of the people in spite of what everyone else is telling them. What does the law say? What does the
Yeah,
Constitution say? And they act in the best interest of the people. We need to stand by them no matter what, no matter what.
we do.
And
And you know what? It's the the true, I'd say, travesty here is that a clerk who was attempting to just make sure there wasn't election fraud, attempting to make sure that everybody's vote counted. Like,
yeah,
that's why she got into this. And she started out when things were being brought to her by citizens
yeah,
saying, "Hey, something doesn't seem right about this election 2021." We're not talking about the 2020. We're talking about 2021 local election.
yeah.
When things were brought to her, she said, I don't think so. I think the elections are secure." I mean, she was running the office at the time, and so she started from that framework. She didn't start from a framework that there's this huge conspiracy to overthrow, or I mean, to
Right.
cheat on election, all that. She started from that. And what was her motive? What was she trying to do? She's trying to get to the bottom of this in her own office and
Yeah.
make sure. And if she needs to take images of the machines that are in her office, she has every right to do that. Had
That was
every right to do
legal.
that at that time. Yep.
It was 100% legal. Jenna
So what
Griswold
again?
made it illegal the following year
Yep.
with SB 163. Tina Peters did not manipulate elections. She did not interfere in an election. That's not what happened. And the people that continue to perpetuate that, including Dan Rubenstein himself, saying that
Yeah.
she interfered in elections, it's a lie. And there will be consequences for this stuff. You're not above the law. You're supposed to be supporting and upholding the law. You're not above it. And I think just to remind everybody, we're going to pull up the Doug Frank testimony in just a moment here, but I want to, you did a great job. I'm trying to find it here real quick. Just laying out this actually, I think, came from Patrick Colbeck originally, Senator Patrick Colbeck out of Missouri. And I just want to read this, just a reminder of what was revealed because of Mesa County Clerk Tina Peters and the forensic images that she legally took. She had every right under the Colorado state statutes to do exactly what she did, and that was not illegal and it was not interference in any election whatsoever. Excuse me, Secretary of State Jenna Griswold, remember, was doing a quote trusted build. And what we thought was happening is what was happening, that they were coming in to erase their bad behavior in the previous election. And so there's images floating around. You can go to my Twitter and see the images that are up that show you the before and after of this. But just a reminder, this is what was revealed. The Clerk Tina Peters made a copy of her Dominion Election Management System (EMS) server before being quote serviced by Dominion and the Secretary of State's office after and a picture after being quote serviced with the quote trusted build. Election records needed to support a post-election audit were deleted in violation of Colorado state and federal law. Has Dan Rubenstein ever investigated that? No. Has the sheriff Todd Rowell ever investigated it? No. The images demonstrate Dominion voting system vulnerabilities and the presence of non-certified software capable of changing election results without detection. 36 wireless devices were found in county EMS system in violation of law and certification requirements. These images showed manipulation of votes new election result databases that were created during the middle of voting, both in the 2021 municipal city council election, which is why I was involved, because I was running two of those campaigns to remind the public. That's why I was involved. I was involved. I cared about what was happening with this. I believe that election was stolen and manipulated. I have the right to believe that and investigate it, whatever. And it also showed that the 2020 election was manipulated, by the way. But we weren't going for that, but that was there in the cast vote records. The digital vote records were reloaded into new databases faster than any possible scan of ballots. You heard that. Not all previous vote records were, quote, reloaded. The forensic reports can be seen at letsfixstuff.org. Go check it out directly. We're going to post this up. We're it's hard to watch Dan Rubenstein in his legal language and his sophistication and his letters behind his name, all the authority and all the power. But I want to remind everybody that the county commissioners also had a vested interest. They whined and complained about losing losing $1 million, but please remember they have to justify their existence and why they continued to go on with a contract with Dominion voting machines for more than $1 million when Clerk Peters had already worked up a contract with another machine company called Clear Ballot for a fraction of the cost. They knew that, they were presented with it, they had all the information, and yet after months and months of people coming and testifying and begging, hours and hours at every county commissioner meeting, you guys in Mesa County, begging the commissioners not to go forward with a contract with Dominion, they said F you to everybody and they did it anyway. Remember this. So they have had to justify their decisions. And again, villainizing Tina Peters is the best way to do that. So let's pull this up and please add anything that I missed, please. Just reminders, things that just keep coming to mind about what has happened here. We'll listen for a couple minutes, and then if you can respond, that would be great. So this is at the at 20. Just so you guys know, if you're watching on your own, this is Dr. Doug Frank, starting at the 29-40 minute mark.
I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak to the court today. Thank you for this. Since first meeting Clerk Peters in April 2021, I've interacted with her on dozens of occasions, both remotely and in person. I've observed her behavior in a variety of situations, and she's always behaved with the utmost integrity. I've been investigating election fraud for almost 4 years now in 48 states, and have met in person with hundreds of election officials. When confronted with systemic problems and fraud in their elections, most officials panic. They are afraid to speak up or ask difficult questions of their state officials. They say, I don't want to be Tina Petered. I have a family to feed, but not Tina. Faced with life and career threatening decisions, and despite great personal fear on her part, she has stood. As far as I'm concerned, she's not only a Gold Star mom, but a Gold Star patriot. No one is paying me to do this. I bought my own plane tickets, paid for my own hotel room. I'm proud to call Tina my friend and stand beside her during this ordeal. During the trial, I was described as the math teacher from Ohio. There's nothing wrong with being a math teacher, but more accurately, I'm a PhD physicist with 60 scientific peer-reviewed publications. 1990, I was nominated for a Nobel Prize in Chemistry for a breakthrough discovery that was featured on the leading journals in the world in science.
I just want to pause for a moment. Do you remember this in the trial when Robert Shapiro said, I will not be calling him doctor?
Yep. I will call him Doug Frank. I won't be referring to him as Dr. Frank. And where was the moderator, the administrator, the judge to say, hold on a second, why are we not referring to him by his credentials? Well, Shapiro was just simply trying to undermine him, make him look like this crazy whatever in front of the jury.
Yeah.
And the judge allowed it. Time after time after time in that trial, the judge sided with the district attorney, the prosecuting attorney, and suppressed information. I mean, hugely suppressed information from the defense. So here we are. And I mean, Dr. Frank is, as you guys, many of you probably know, but if you don't know, you need to look him up. He's I mean, talk about somebody who's qualified to speak on these things. It's good stuff.
All right.
1996, I helped establish a school for extraordinarily gifted youngsters in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I served as the math and science chairman for over 20 years. These are amazing students. If you put 10,000 kids in a room, only one of them would have an IQ like the kids we have at our school. I've also been designing electronics and writing software and computer programming since I was a teenager. I'm one of the first 300 people on the internet. I'm no stranger to math, science, and technology. I've been mathematically modeling elections since the 80s. So when I was asked by members of the Pennsylvania State Legislature to investigate their election, I was able to reverse engineer the algorithms that were being used to manipulate our elections. It was this work that caught the attention of Mr. Lindell, who made a documentary movie about my work called Scientific Proof. It was during the filming of that documentary that I met Conan Hayes, the hacker that was referred to during this trial. Also became good friends with him and Kurt Olson during that time. During the trial, I was surprised to learn that there were recordings made of my first meeting with Clerk Peters. I didn't know about that in April of 2021. Unfortunately, only the shorter recording was played during the trial. If the jury
This is absolutely true. You've said this repeatedly that they were withholding evidence from the jury. I can't even tell you how many times, if you watched it, if anybody did or cares to, every time I spoke, every time I started to say anything, Shapiro would shut me down. When they handed me the evidence they wanted me to read, many times there was evidence in there that the jury needed to hear in order to make a decision. And I was not allowed to say anything. When I started to say it anyway, I would be shut down immediately. This travesty, though, of only playing part of that meeting recording was unbelievable. You think that these people are legit. Anyone who still thinks these people are legit, what Dr. Frank is saying is absolutely true. This was a very benign meeting. I invited everybody who wanted to come. I was like, everybody wants to come, because he's going to explain to the clerk and her staff like what he thinks is going on so they can start really paying attention to this stuff. And the way that they tried to manipulate it was pretty incredible, pretty next level,
Yeah,
pretty next
it's
level.
all about the framework, and they're framing
Mhm.
it how they want to frame it. Unfortunately, in our system, what's no longer true is that you would think what we'd want in a just system is for all the evidence for both sides to be presented, because all we're trying to do is come to the truth, right? That's the way it should be. So why would I want to be withholding parts of that meeting? Why would I only want a small segment of something played here? Well, because then it's all about your agenda. It's all about your bias. Then my agenda is to win this case instead of having the truth be revealed. And it's a big problem with our system, in our judicial system, with attorneys, most of which are just completely pathetic losers who just want,
Did you
they're getting
say
paid hundreds of
Shapiro?
thousands of dollars. They
Did
have an
I hear you say that?
agenda, and their agenda is, I want this person convicted. Whereas their mindset should be, now hold on, even from a prosecution standpoint, if there's evidence that will show that maybe this defendant isn't as guilty as I'm saying they are, or isn't guilty of
Right.
certain crimes that I'm prosecuting her for,
Yeah.
I want that presented, because I
Yeah.
don't want the defendant going to prison on something that may not be true. Maybe I'm
Let
off here, but you don't have that, do we? We don't have that.
n and it becomes very clear when it becomes very clear, and it was clear, and I think the second day of my testimony, it was very obvious, and I felt deflated because I thought, "It doesn't matter what I say. Everything I say, they're
Yeah.
spinning it different." James Cannon, the other investigator for DA, Rubenstein, is coming in here and telling lies, literal lies. He literally lied to the jury and was caught, thankfully, but he did lie, saying that he did not have a copy of the signal chat with Jerry Wood, and he did. And they believe that James Cannon deleted it actually to try to say he didn't have it. Um, and he did have it. And that's the conversation where Jerry Wood is very clear. He knows exactly what's going on. He's saying, "You're so welcome. Glad I could help. This is so great." All of that. And James Cannon tried to hide that evidence from from the jury. So thankfully, the defense team did have that and find it, but this is what they were doing. They were systematic lying, covering things up. So, okay, let's keep going. Oh, you know what? Actually, I think let's pause for just a moment. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to be back in just a moment here. I want to thank you guys. We are talking about the Tina Peters sentencing. We're here with Neil Bishop. This is actually my husband who was here through the whole He was there watching the whole entire thing unfold and happen, and the shocking, turnabout with the district attorney and what they decided to criminalize, which was not illegal, it was not unlawful, it was not criminal, and yet they pursued anyway. If you think that these corporations aren't pulling major strings and Soros-funded secretaries of state like Jenna Griswold aren't ruling and dominating over your local officials, well, we've got news for you. So we're going to be right back. All right, everybody. So there's a huge conversation happening right now about fentanyl, the impact that it's having on our children, on our families. Over 200,000 people were poisoned last year by fentanyl, whether it be in our pills or our everyday use products that are coming from the CCP. We know that China is flooding our southern border with fentanyl. So I have a solution for you. I don't ever want anybody to be wondering what they could have done differently to protect their families. So I want to encourage you to go to thefentanyltest.com and go check it out today. Go order your own fentanyl test to have in your home. Every product that comes in, every pill that comes in, you're able to test it right there without destroying the product, which is very unusual, by the way. It's the first of its kind. It's super affordable, and it can help you literally save your child's lives. I have had mothers on here who have talked about their children dying from fentanyl poisoning. It did not have to happen. We have to be on the offense. So please go to thefentanyltest.com. I'm not willing to let them kill one more child in this country as they try to destroy us from within. Thefentanyltest.com. Go check it out today and spread the word. We're going to get right back into it. We've been reviewing the sentencing statements from Dr. Doug Frank, who, brilliantly came to Mesa County and came to Colorado to help. And so we're going to get right back into this, okay? Appreciate everybody. Please make sure you're sharing this out because this is the truth. And Neil Bishop, my husband, is sharing his direct perspective as he was there witnessing everything happening in real time. Here we go.
If they had been allowed to listen to the longer recording, they would have heard exculpatory evidence that at all times Clerk Peters was concerned about transparency, integrity, and following the law. She was asking us to bring her the evidence that we were gathering so that she and her staff could investigate it. There was no discussion of personal fame or plane rides, rather concern on Peters' part regarding reprisals from the State County Clerk Association and the Secretary of State. In fact, I was present at the meeting many months later, just prior to the cyber symposium, when it was decided that we would send Mr. Lindell's plane to retrieve Clerk Peters. Until then, she wasn't even going to be an attendee. It was
absolutely true. Sorry. Absolutely true. Neither was I. We were not going. You know who was going? Who booked a ticket and booked a room, Neil? Are you there? Did I lose you? Well, I'll tell you who did. Jerry Wood. Jerry Wood booked a room. Oh, sorry about that. Okay.
I can't hear you
Who
now.
booked a room? Who is the only person who booked a room and bought a plane ticket to go to the cyber symposium?
I can't hear you.
You can't hear me? I don't know why you can't hear me. Jerry Wood. Jerry Wood is the only person in our group who had booked a ticket and a hotel room.
Yeah,
That's crazy for a victim.
I don't know if I'm not.
That's crazy for a victim to have done that. Isn't that wild? Okay, let's go on.
Someone else who exposed the fact that there were forensic images made of her systems, not her. And the tiny bit of information that was exposed was blurred and unrecognizable by anyone except someone from the Secretary of State's office. There was no harm done. In other words, if the Secretary of State's office had said nothing, most people had never even heard of Tina Peters, and she would not have been thrust against her own intentions into the limelight, and we would not be here today. But instead, the Secretary of State panicked. The whole notion for my recorded phrase, "it would be a feather in your cap," was also misconstrued by the prosecution during the trial. Across the country, election officials are understandably concerned because the public...
Dr. Frank, you're suggesting that we're here today because of what the Secretary of State did?
Yes.
And not because Ms. Peters took the video in the first place and gave it to someone who then put it on the internet? That's your suggestion? You can go on. I don't need an answer.
Right. Across the country, election officials are All
right. So is that normal behavior? I'm just curious.
Understandably concerned because the public has been blaming them for the election fraud that occurred in 2020. In the recording, I was heard assuring Clerk Peters and her staff that if they discovered any fraud in their elections, and if they made it public, it would actually make them look good. They would be doing their jobs exceptionally well. Instead of blaming the election officials, it would be seen by the public as a feather in their cap. Clerk Peters already had sufficient evidence to be concerned. She knew about the laws about preservation of election data, and she had an official directive from the Secretary of State to perform the necessary backups. She knew that she needed to preserve the election data for further investigation, but her own IT department refused to do the backups. And when she sought a local IT professional to do them, he was not able to obtain the necessary equipment in time. Clerk Peters was out of time. The trusted build was imminent. So she called me for help. I connected her to a world-class, federally licensed white hat hacker that I had just met. He agreed to help on short notice to preserve her data and to observe the update, but on condition of anonymity because of the critical nature of his federal work. Clerk Peters even verified his credentials and checked with state officials to make sure that he was permitted to be president. This demonstrates that at all times—
What state official? What state official did she communicate with?
She testified that she contacted the Secretary of State's office to find out how many people and who could be present at the update.
No. You said she spoke to a state official that said he could be present, and I'm wondering who that was.
I don't recall that from the trial, but I remember her saying that she called the office.
She didn't testify at trial.
Well, who was it?
I thought that is something she said to you, and I'm wondering who that was.
No, she didn't say. I was.
What Dr. Frank is talking about is when Clerk Peters asked the local IT guys there in the county building, would they please come do this forensic image? And they said they would not. And so then she had to find someone. Jerry Wood said he would do it. Then he realized it was above his skill set. She checked every box to make sure and went through every avenue to make sure she could get this done and get it done correctly so that it would be helpful. And that was not illegal. And what's interesting about this too, and I'm not sure, are you able to hear me? Okay, Neil's having some audio issues. What's interesting about this too is that the part where they're saying that she didn't have the authority, it was never really addressed in the trial that she had absolute authority to determine who was in that room. Jenna Griswold made a rule very last minute saying she had to approve the people that Clerk Peters picked. And remember this also, Jenna Griswold said, you cannot make this public. And Clerk Peters wanted the public to be there. She wanted people to be able to come and witness the trusted build in real time in person. And when Judge Barrett mentions the video, it was not against the law to record. It was not against the law to make a video at all. In fact, they do it all the time for training purposes. Clerk Peters had always made videos in the past. It was not new. It was not illegal. It was completely within her purview to do that. So when they drop these little phrases that make you think, oh, well, was she allowed to? Yes, she was allowed to do that. That was not illegal. That was not a crime. She did not do that. She did not break the law, excuse me. So when Judge Barrett is constantly interrupting, trying to drive a certain point home to justify what he's about to do to Clerk Peters, it's just interesting. So pay attention to that.
I listened to the trial.
Oh, okay. All right.
Sorry. So good question. Good clarification. Let's see here. Let's see what okay, here. Yes. But Clerk Peters did verify his credentials. I'm aware of that, and checked with state officials. And that's what we just talked about, to make sure that he is permitted to be present. I remember the discussion about 2 people could be present during the build. It was that part of the testimony. Okay. This demonstrates that at all times, Clerk Peters was striving to be law abiding. I've since helped to arrange election systems evaluations and penetration testing in several states. This is ongoing. It is important to understand that during such evaluations, one does not inform the staff of what and when certain things are going to happen. You know, what's the sense of announcing that you're about to do a security test to everybody? No, the idea is to test the security of the system without people knowing you're about to do that. Thus, this is not a conspiracy. This is standard practice. Banks, businesses, government institutions perform these sorts of cybersecurity evaluations all the time. For example, soon after my meeting with Clerk Peters in April 2021, I helped to arrange a similar evaluation in Lake County, Ohio. Look it up. When the results were presented to the Ohio Secretary of State, he also panicked and called the FBI. After the FBI investigation, there were no charges made because nothing illegal happened. Just like in Clerk Peters' situation, a federally licensed white hat hacker was asked by county officials to help evaluate their election systems. And both evaluations exposed the fact that their systems were out of compliance with federal standards. In the state of Missouri, their new 22 election laws require such testing on a regular basis.
We're going to pause for a second. So we're kind of doing this differently, but you just talk with me through here. I'm not sure what's happening with your audio, but so they've just got done talking about how Conan Hayes was a federally licensed hacker, which is completely true. He actually filled out an affidavit that Judge Barrett refused to be admitted into the court proceedings as evidence, demonstrating the incredible skill set, the fact that he actually had the highest level of security clearance in the nation. Conan Hayes has the highest clearance of security in the nation. A simple background check that the Secretary of State would have done does not compare to all of the clearances that Conan Hayes had. Judge Barrett refused to allow the affidavit to be shown to the jury, demonstrating that Conan Hayes was not some schmo off the street. He was the most qualified person possible to come in and do that forensic image. And as Dr. Frank just testified, or excuse me, is saying, and had testified before actually, the exact same situation, exactly the same situation of a clerk making an image before and after, and Conan Hayes not being able to use his formal name to come in to do the imaging happened in Ohio, and the case was thrown out because they understood, oh, okay, well, this guy works for the federal government. That's right, he does, and he was a CIA asset, and he wrote a book. His father wrote a book. His father was also a CIA asset. I hope you guys all understand this. Conan Hayes' father was a CIA asset, and he wrote a book about it, and I've read it, and it's unbelievable. The CIA turned on Conan's father, and he ended up spending 20 years in prison. And it's an unbelievable story. So Conan Hayes already had all of the credentials, all the clearances. Judge Barrett refused to allow this evidence to be shown to the jury in a signed affidavit by Conan Hayes himself. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. Is Dan Rubenstein above that?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you now.
Okay, good. I think the good question is to ask why. Why are you suppressing? It's just all it is evidence. That's all it is. All it is facts. All right. Fact is, who is he? Who is Conan Hayes? Yes. Why do we not want those facts to be presented? Does it possibly thwart their efforts to convict someone by not allowing evidence to be presented? Because aren't we all just after the truth? That's what I thought. Shouldn't the judicial system just want to know the truth? And I mean, God forbid, should attorneys want to know the truth? Should a state prosecutor? Should a district attorney want to know the truth? If there's something that could be presented that might paint Tina in maybe a better light, why, unless you have a personal vendetta, why not allow that evidence to be presented so a jury of her peers could make a objective decision, knowing all the evidence on both sides? But again, it's the system. Once you get into you're on their chessboard now. They decide if they want to. We can suppress whatever we want. We can withhold testimony if we want. We can have an expert witness, such as yourself, go up on the stand and every 5 seconds get interrupted, say you can't say that, you can't do that, you can't tell that. Shush, we don't want you to talk too much. Why is that?
Exactly.
I mean, so it really begs the question, was the prosecution, were they after the truth here? Isn't that what we're supposed to be, is after the truth? Or were they just after a person? And it didn't matter what it took. We just want to paint this person in the most negative way possible. And that's sad.
It's
because
interesting.
as you even pointed out at sentencing, you're dealing with people's lives here.
Yeah.
I know that there was people hurt. They had their hurt feelings. I know the DA had his hurt feelings and had his feelings hurt. I know people in Mason County had their feelings hurt because maybe they didn't like the way that Tina went about doing things or whatever, or they had a disagreement. What happened was initially everybody wanted all parties on board to just take an objective look at, hey, is there something nefarious going on here in Mason County with elections? That's all. That's what we wanted. The problem is like you put someone back on the heels and you reject it and you say, and you continue to put them back on their heels. Like Tina had to take a stance. And so then it's like, well, you just shut up. People are like, well, you just shut up. Just be quiet about it. And I'm like, no, I won't. And then it just becomes this. Then it's a fight. Then it's just an all-out battle. It never had to be that way. If there would have been an investigation triggered by the
never had to
DA
be
and
this
court
way.
process,
Yeah.
I mean, if people would have taken it
Never.
seriously, taken an objective look, didn't have to be this way. And if Congresswoman Lauren Boebert would have taken a stand and said, hey, there's something here. There's something here. Let's just let this person take a look. And you know, even now, I haven't heard a statement from her.
Well, here's the thing. We're up on a hard stop. Believe it or not, we filled up our entire hour. We're going to be back in just for part 2. So everybody hang tight. We're going to start part 2 and just it'll run for all of you guys. So this conversation is still going to keep going. Please follow up with us and join us on Monday. You're going to see part 2 of this. But we're going to end on that note. Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, what happened there? I want to thank everybody for being with us today. We're going to be, again, we'll be back in just a few moments, but I want to thank everybody for being with us today on our Patriot TV family. And again, watch Monday for part 2 of this analysis and firsthand testimony of the ongoing assault on America's election system and on the citizen. What right does the citizen actually have in America still? Thank you for being with us today on America's Mom. Remember, all that's necessary for evil to prevail is for good men and women to do absolutely nothing. See you back here soon. All right, just kidding, guys. We're still here. Sorry, we are live streaming this because I know that a lot of you are not on Patriot TV yet, and we think the conversation is so important and so critical right now that people understand what has just happened here. I can't live with myself thinking that they get the last word about Clerk Peters, that they get to sit there and say the things they said. So we are going to open one more time. Please forgive me because this is our show. All right, guys. So welcome back to America's Mom and part 2 today of our conversation regarding the Tina Peters sentencing trial, the sentencing from her trial. And I have with us today a special guest who has been on the front lines right there watching everything that has transpired from day one. And that is my husband, Neil Bishop. He worked in the criminal justice world for over 24 years, was forced out of his career actually because he was talking about the Constitution and standing up against COVID mandates and protocols. And at the end of the day, standing up for his children, it's a wild story, and I need to just interview him directly about that because he's had an interesting life in side by side what we've been experiencing through all of this nonsense. But it's more than nonsense because we're looking at the clerk Tina Peters was given 9 years consecutive sentence. And nobody could really believe that happened. Even Kyle Clark from Channel 9 News had gotten on the next day and said, by the way, he's a leftist talking head, but even he said that he believed it would be like 9 months probation, not 9 years in the Department of Corrections. So we're going to get back into Dr. Douglas Frank's sentencing speech. But what do you think when you hear that? In all your time, like you said, you worked with really seriously violent people who had actual victims, and here we have a clerk who is charged by the state constitution to preserve all election records. And that means more than the Secretary of State, Jenna Griswold's quote rules. What do you think about what has happened here?
Yeah, many times you see people. Can you hear me okay, by the way?
You're on the computer mic, not your regular mic,
yeah,
but that's okay.
I don't know what to do. It just mutes me when I put it on this microphone. But many times in criminal justice, in sentencing, people look at people. The system is supposed to look at aggravating and mitigating circumstances. Now, it's easy to frame it one way or the other. And as you'll see when you watch the sentencing hearing, it's very obvious the way the judge decided to frame it. And in my mind, the judge framed it that Tina was wrong. She was wrong about elections. She was wrong about election interference. She was wrong about local elections being tampered with. And he framed it as though she's unrepentant and she needed to kiss the king's ring and beg for mercy and say, I'm so wrong. I'm so sorry. Please have mercy upon me, you most high, whatever you are, monarch.
Well, let's take a listen.
He
Let's
didn't
take
do
a
that.
listen to that. Let's take a listen to that now that you brought that up. Let's listen to it real quickly what he says to her because he's saying that this should put every American citizen. He wants to actually um, cause every American citizen to reconsider if they want to commit a similar crime as Clerk Peters. So take a listen to this, you guys. This is District Attorney Dan Rubenstein, who started this witch hunt along with the Secretary of State Jenna Griswold. Listen to this.
The chilling effect that this should have on other people committing the same crimes she committed. Mr. Schroeder got up and said, we don't want to discourage people from raising their hand and saying we may have an issue here. That's absolutely true. We want people to raise their hand and say we have an issue here, not commit a bunch of crimes covertly to try to figure out if there's an issue.
Again, not a crime. Sorry, DA.
Yeah.
Not a crime.
Yeah, we see what you're saying there. And again, it's all about framework. So, and it's what I've heard many people say, well, maybe there was a problem with elections, but it doesn't mean you commit a crime. Doesn't mean you break the law to find out. And people are speaking so ignorantly about this. And a good question is, well, what law did she break? Well, now people will just quote, we're just parrots. Parrots. Well, she was found guilty of a jury of her peers of this and that crime. So that's what she broke. That's the law she broke. But we've already demonstrated, and we can demonstrate for hours, how biased the system can be, and in this case, how much evidence they did not allow to be presented. They didn't allow a clear presentation of all the facts in order to allow a jury of her peers to come to a reasonable conclusion about what happened, that beyond a reasonable doubt, she committed crimes. And the whole point of what she did was to try to make sure that your vote counted, that the judge's vote counted, that the district attorney's vote counted, that all the people that hate and scream about her, she was trying to make sure your vote counted. That's what she was trying to do. And sometimes it takes some difficult work and maybe like behind the scenes stuff, because we're in a system here that's very controlled, it's very centralized, and they proved that. You had the Secretary of State of Colorado, and then you had all these federal agents saying, whoa, 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 we've got a clerk in Mesa County and citizens that are questioning the election. And now the district attorney says, now we hope this will discourage others from committing similar crimes. Actually, interpretation, we hope that nobody else will ever question our divine authority of what is and is not the truth. And we decided, and the judge proved it during sentencing, he doesn't believe that there's an election problem. That's his personal opinion. And he argued with Clerk Peters during sentencing, during her statement, it was her time to give her statement about what the things that happened and why she shouldn't be going to prison. The judge interrupted her and he waxed eloquent about how certain things, that certain arguments that Tina was making were inaccurate about elections. Like he's some sort of an expert on elections. It's the biased nature of this is unbelievably astounding.
Because I was there, Clay Parikh, who is, like federally sought after for, he is a hacker also, but he's the good guys, that the federal government uses. And not only the federal government, but actually international organizations use Clay Parikh to assess their systems and their machines and all of this. Okay. He's been doing this forever. He's been breaking into election machines for years, Clay Parikh. Clay Parikh showed up to testify at Tina's trial. So you have the ignorance that you just talked about with the judge. If the judge had allowed Clay Parikh to speak, he would know that the things he said in argument against Tina Peters were completely lies, completely just not just moronic, but he is espousing lies because he sits on the throne as the law. He's sitting there as the face of the law saying, this doesn't exist. I put a ballot in, it counts it. That's it. It's all done. It's legit. Clay Parikh showed up to testify and I think they maybe had him up there for just a minute, if it even happened. I don't even recall now because it was so brief. They did not allow, again, this is a part of withholding evidence. They did not allow any of the forensic experts to speak. Not any of them. Not Clay Parikh, not Clay Parikh, not Ben Cotton, not Dr. Douglas Frank. Nobody. They certainly did not allow Conan Hayes, and they would not even allow him to submit his affidavit. This is information the jury should have seen to understand what was going on here. And why they didn't pursue the fact that Clerk Peters did not break Colorado state law is interesting to me too, though, even on her defense side. I guess I don't know. They had a certain angle they were working from, and I'm not going to play Monday morning quarterback at all because that was a super intense situation. There was a ton of pretrial rules that were made that prevented literally any evidence whatsoever. I wasn't even allowed to say that you worked in judicial. As soon as I started to say that, objection, objection, uh,
Yeah.
and I'm like, because the point would be, I'm a law-abiding citizen. I am law abiding. I knew the law. Everything was addressed through the law. And as Dr. Frank said in that meeting where they say the conspiracy began, when I said, "So what's the plan?" If you listen to the recording, I said, "So what's your plan for the trusted build?" I'm just asking. I'm like, "What's the plan for your trusted build? What are you guys going to do?" Because I don't even know what that is yet. I'm learning right then what all's going on. I have no idea. But they didn't frame it that way. They framed it as the conspiracy is launched at this meeting, and this is what happened. It's not true. It's just not true. And Clark Peters repeatedly said, everything must be done within the law. And I will just tell you that's why I was willing to even work with her. She said everything must be done within the framework of the law. So I felt safe. I felt protected because I knew she wasn't going to go outside the law. The law, not Jenna Griswold's stupid rule, the law. So it's interesting, again, listening to this stuff and to this nonsense from Dan Rubenstein. His intention is very clear. Don't you dare argue with electronic voting machine companies. I hear it. I hear you, Dan. I hear you, Danny. So
Are we ready to talk about what people can do moving forward?
not quite yet. Is there? Let's revisit our last conversation. We ended on the Congresswoman Lauren Boebert note, and people may or may not know that I was served a cease and desist by her in October of 2021, totally out of the blue. I was
Yeah.
completely hit upside the head. I had no idea what was going on. I didn't even understand why I would get one of those. Like, I didn't even know what I had done. So I actually called Randy Corcoran to ask him what this means. Why would I get this? Number one, because Lauren wasn't answering her phone. Surprise, surprise. Because I, of course, started calling her. I'm like, I mean, I was just like, what is this? And he tried to explain to me what it means. You were there.
So yeah, the cease and desist was, I think, from their perspective, they don't want you questioning anything that she was doing. They don't want you putting out anything publicly that where it might look to disparage her. That's from their perspective, but from ours, it's like cease and desist. What are we ceasing and desisting from? I mean, it was like, I think what it was is a warning because they saw what was coming. I will say this, that Congresswoman Boebert knew about the FBI raids before they happened and did nothing to step in, did nothing to stop it. All throughout this Tina Peters fiasco and all the things that happened to us in the FBI raid and all that, there's no advocacy from her. She's not, using her platform to bring awareness to what's going on. She's not questioning the authorities involved. In fact, she later in November, after all of these raids, she complimented the district attorney and said, how good of a job he's doing in handling all of this. And so she became very silent about election integrity, even though that she's a big time, said publicly that the 2020 election was stolen because that was popular, because Trump was saying it. So all that, everybody that's a Trumper comes alongside and says, oh yeah, the election was stolen. Okay. But when it came down to where the rubber meets the road, here's local people trying to make sure that our elections are secure and that our votes count. And we're getting hammered by the public officials and things like that. Where was Lauren Boebert, and why did she get so silent during all of this? It's a great question.
Craziest,
And
the craziest, on a personal note, real quick, sorry to interrupt. Who was watching some of her children during this time?
yeah, I mean, on a personal note, our kids were at our house. We'll just say that there was little to no supervision going on. with her children during that time. And then come to find out, not too long after all this stuff started taking place, our kids found out actually that their kids weren't allowed at our house anymore. We were completely cut off. We both tried to speak with her on numerous occasions during that time. This is November of 2021, moving forward. And we were put on red, as they say. And so, it's not surprising now, and we tried to tell her this and those around her, like, she needed to have really good moral, high upstanding people around her to make sure she didn't get off course. And we saw her getting off course very quickly.
Yeah.
And one of the things we said at the time, and I still say, if people aren't willing to talk about publicly, if elected officials aren't willing to talk about issues like election integrity, then what are they even talking about?
Well, and I think
If you're
too,
not
when they
willing to,
know
like,
the situation was so interesting because they knew, the Congresswoman knew what was happening, knew that there was concern over the electronic voting machines, knew there was major concern over that municipal election, and knew about the canvassing efforts that were going on, and wanted to support the clerk in doing the forensic images. And so there was all of that that was happening. And so to know that at the grand scheme of things, this is what we talk about with politicians. This is why it's very unique with Clerk Peters. I just have to reiterate this. And it is unique that she did not consider her own position in life. That this was part of what she was supposed to do. This was her position, was to make sure that she fundamentally did her job for real, not halfway, not with just checking boxes. She is charged with securing election information, all of it, every single scrap, including paper, like everything has to be secured. She took that seriously. And then you have ones like we're talking about who, when things get tough, they just go, they're gone. They're gone. I don't know where they went. They're just gone. And they're out there doing their thing. But you at home know what kind of person they really are. You know the shallowness of their character, and you know that when it's really truly hard, they bail. So I think,
yeah, when
again,
it's
it's been a
hard, when
mhm.
it's hard, some people will bail. Also, if somebody gets pulled aside and somebody said, like, let's say a DA pulled somebody aside, a district attorney pulled someone aside and said, hey, you could go down too. We could charge you with this or that crime. You probably want to, you probably, and we don't want to, we're just trying to do the right thing here, but we know this or that. We know that you were somewhat involved or you knew. So you better comply with us, that kind of thing. Or in some cases, people get pulled aside and they say, we have this or that on you. We know this or that about your past.
Mm.
Maybe a DA or maybe somebody higher up in the Republican Party, or maybe somebody that knows says, hey, it's like when the Woods got their stuff taken, and
Oh,
Jerry Wood's laptop was saying whatever. Somebody could pull someone aside and say, we have this or that we found on your laptop. You don't want that to get out in public, do you? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if they had junk on people. I mean, I'm just saying it's possible. It's possible that could happen. And so you use that as blackmail, but it's not really blackmail to people that are doing it. It's more like, we're doing you a favor here.
we're making a
We
deal.
wouldn't
We're
want
just
that
trying to
to go
protect you,
public.
right?
Yeah, we're
We're
trying to
just trying to
protect
protect
you.
you.
We want to put the really bad ones in jail. And, so we wouldn't want anything from your, let's say, just as an example, from your laptop to get out there. We wouldn't want something from your past to get out there, would we? And we most certainly wouldn't want you to be a co-conspirator named as, right now you're an unindicted co-conspirator, and they might tell that person you could become an indicted
Right.
co-conspirator. So you better comply with that. We think it's in your best interest to comply with this. And so some that don't have much of a spine will come under that. Or some that don't want something about their personal life to get out will come under that. So those are things to keep in mind, you guys. And so this is another reason why it's so important for we the people to be, like, when we elect a person to a position like Congress, like Congresswoman Bobertson, It should be like, go there for 2 years, get your frickin' butt in there and get the job done, and then get out, and we'll put somebody else in there to continue the work that you're doing. We're not
On
putting
that
you in
note,
there to have a lifetime, income and the best life insurance, the best health insurance, and the best income in the world, and to go be
right.
partying up and smoking this or that with your various boyfriends. Get in there, get your job done,
Uh-oh.
and get out.
Okay, on that note, you guys see why I love him. 26 years together now. Oh, well, actually almost 30 years together, 26 married. This is why. We're going to be right back, guys. We're up on a hard break. We are here with the mister talking about the Tina Peters sentencing, spilling a lot of information that you don't know about that we couldn't talk about until now. And who knows what will happen to us now? I don't know. But we're going to be right back right after this brief message. All right, everybody. As you know, it's all about America for me. America first. But first, America, which is why I support American manufacturing, American patriots, American workers, and American made. And that's really important to me because I want to make sure that my family has the best quality at a price I can afford under this current administration that's sucking us all dry. Inflation, as you know, is massively higher than they're actually telling us. So we can have all of that. We can have good, clean, effective products that are made for us right here in America. I want to encourage everybody to join my club. Go to shopwithpatriots.com and go join our club today. It is a club. It is a private membership for patriots who love this country, want to shop American made with over 500 personal use everyday products from your supplementation to the shampoo. They have amazing products. They even are carrying now Nature's Ozempic. It's not Ozempic because we don't want that. It's Nature's Ozempic. I will share more with you guys. Just hit me up with a DM. Please go to shopwithpatriots.com and go check it out because this is our place to take back our country. American manufacturing, Peter Navarro said, is the fastest way for America to get back on her feet again. So I, for one, I'm going to be supporting American manufacturers. Go to shopwithpatriots.com and go check it out today. Please be nice to our people. These are sweet people who have refused to go along with this administration and with their mandates, and they are now working with us. So be kind to them and join our movement today. Shopwithpatriots.com. All right, everybody. We are talking today with Neil Bishop. Actually, that is my husband. And he was there for everything, watching everything play out, thinking, wow, what's my wife doing now? And was as shocked as the rest of all of us at the outcome of the Clerk Peters trial. Why? Because we knew that many of those things were not laws that were broken. We knew she wasn't a criminal. We knew that the prosecution and Dan Rubenstein absolutely had an axe to grind. And one of the things that stands out to me too, I just want to remind if you're in Mesa County and you were there for the precinct stuff, I've got you back on. If you were there for precinct stuff in the primary of 22. So Tina Peters ran for Secretary of State. And I was there with Wendy Wood was there. Jerry Wood's wife was there the night that we made this decision. Isn't that interesting? In fact, a lot of people who have just, fallen by the wayside and have decided they're victims of Tina Peters or victimized, I guess I should say, by Tina Peters. They were all there and we were having a great old time. This was around, I think, like February of 22, I think somewhere around there. Anyway, we're all together and we're like, let's do it. Let's run a Secretary of State race. Let's make this happen. This is going to be, I mean, what do you do, right? To push back on Jenna Griswold. And Clerk Peters, probably one of the most interesting times of my life, probably the most stressful campaign I've ever run in my life too. She's a formidable candidate. She's a formidable opponent. And I don't think Dan Rubenstein was prepared for that at all. I do believe he thought she was just going to cower, play nice with him, all of this, but he again was building a case on behalf of the Secretary of State that had no real merit. Just because they've done this, just because Judge Barrett has sentenced Tina to 9 years in prison does not mean that that there was a crime. I'm never going to be able to go down that road because I know exactly what happened. And we've been talking about, if you missed our interview from Friday, you're going to want to go watch that because we talked about how the court frames things, how just in general, criminal justice frames things to fit a certain narrative that works for them. And it's not always in the best interest of the people, nor is it always accurate. So we spent a lot of time talking about that. But Thank you for being here, and thank you for talking through this. You know, in this, we're going to get back to the Dr. Frank video in just a moment, but when it comes to Congresswoman Boebert, we had to take a hard stop there. When it comes to Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, what message do you have for her? After knowing her personally, sacrificing a lot for her race, and finding her MIA when it really mattered.
What are you doing, Congresswoman? How are you stepping in? How are you stepping in for Clerk Peters? You know, guys, it's not over. We need people calling the Congresswoman, and you can call the district attorney, you can call the judge's office and say this is unacceptable. And yeah, that's my message is a question. What are you doing about it? And also, you know, enough of this screwing around, partying, you know, with the boyfriends and all that stuff. Like, there's work to be done, and let's get the work done. This is serious. I think something that, you know, is becoming very clear. This hit hard, knowing that we're in such a information war right now, and a war over the First Amendment. People are literally believing that you don't have a right to share your mind anymore. You don't have the right to speak your opinion. You can't have an opinion. I've had people tell us that government officials shouldn't be able to bring their opinion into their job. What are you talking about? You want a government official to be a robot that doesn't have an opinion? That's what they tried to tell me in 2020 about the whole, you know, the masks and social distancing, and they wanted me to start giving people temperatures and giving people medical advice and all this stuff. I'm like, I'm not a medical professional. I don't have the credentials to do this anyway. And I can have an opinion about this. My opinion, just because I'm a judicial employee, or I was, but at the time I'm saying, just because I'm a judicial employee doesn't mean I can't have an opinion about what judicial is doing. It doesn't mean I have to agree with every single thing judicial does. That becomes a cult. And is the judicial system a cult? Has our criminal justice system become a cult? And what we witnessed during this trial is cult-like behavior. We have the system, the entire system, against this one individual. And you create a narrative and frame it a certain way, like you said earlier, that makes this individual look a certain way, incompetent, crazy, throw out the conspiracy theory word, which I'm proudly a conspiracy theorist. I don't have enough tinfoil to wrap around my body and my head to express how proud I am to be a conspiracy theorist, because the CT initials in conspiracy theory, you know what that actually stands for? Critical thinker. The CT is a critical thinker. And we had a clerk in this case who was not believing in conspiracy and not believing in theories about the election in 2021 in Mesa County being rigged or stolen or hacked or whatever. She was saying, no, I don't think that's the case. Then she started investigating and looking at things that seemed to be discrepancies. People went on a door-to-door canvassing. Citizens went door-to-door canvassing, finding oddities in the election. They presented them to her. She wasn't started up. People didn't get a phone call. We've never gotten a phone call from Trump or anybody else saying, hey, we'll pay you if you start questioning blah, blah. I mean, come on, you guys. There's not some conspiracy going on like that. The conspiracy is that we're realizing is we've been having selections, not elections, for a long time. And I can have that opinion. Even if it weren't true, I can have that opinion. And even if it weren't true and I have that opinion and I spew it out all over social media, I can still do it. But it is true. There is selections going on. There are selections. They have been for a long time. And you guys, the last thing we want to do is become afraid and try to make them set the standard where they say, now we want people raising their hands saying, there may be an issue here. We want them raising their hands saying, there's a possibility that there's an issue. Then what he's saying is, if you do that as a citizen, bring your issues to us, your divine eminence.
Never was going to do it.
And then we'll decide if it's an issue. But Tina didn't stop there. You didn't stop there. And citizens haven't stopped there because we don't trust those elected officials to investigate because they're proving that they're not going to do it. So we're not just raising our hands saying, there might be an issue, and here you go, Mr. and Mrs. Elected Official. You guys go check it out. No, we're building our own table, and we're saying there is a problem here. We've investigated. We, the people, are more powerful than the positions and the people that we elect. We're saying there's a problem here. So don't cower back, you guys. They're trying to set a standard where people get scared and they're cowering back. And we have to be on the offensive here and keep moving forward. And I think there are things that can be done and pressure that should be applied to definitely the Congresswoman Boebert, to the local officials that were involved, county commissioners. Let them know your concerns. This is crazy. 9 years for
Let's
trying
hear
to make
this
sure
last.
Essex County.
Exactly. Let's hear this last part from Dr. Frank that just kind of echoes what you're saying, just because he deserves that. This man has been fully transparent. Obviously, one of the most, he was up for a Nobel Chemistry Prize. Like, come on, this is the smartest man in the room, and he's also one of the most sweetest, humblest, God-fearing men, and has literally given up his life to try to do as much as he can to help local officials, because they are not the enemy. Local officials are not the enemy. Um, Help them to uncover what's going on in their own elections. Are they legit? So let's hear the rest of his statement.
After the FBI investigation, there were no charges made because nothing illegal happened. Just like in Clerk Peters' situation, a federally licensed white hat hacker was asked by county officials to help evaluate their election systems. And both evaluations exposed the fact that their systems were out of compliance with federal standards. In the state of Missouri, their new 22 election laws require such testing on a regular basis. This shows that Tina Peters was not only behaving responsibly, but was actually ahead of the curve in terms of election integrity and security. Because I've been involved in this situation from the very outset, and during many critical points in the way, I am uniquely qualified to evaluate Clerk Peters' state of mind and intentions. I've also seen her courageous behavior during simultaneous, amazingly stressful life events. Some, I believe, are deliberately exacerbated by government officials trying to make an example out of her in order to intimidate all election officials around the country into an unquestioning compliance. Tina Peters is no conspirator. Tina Peters is a patriot. Tina Peters is law-abiding. Tina Peters is not a threat to anyone except perhaps some government officials who have something to hide. It boggles my mind and shames our country that a Gold Star mom has had to endure this ordeal. She should not have to endure one more minute of this tyranny. As Jefferson said, when the people are afraid of the government, there's tyranny. When the government is afraid of the people, there's liberty. I implore the court today, restore Tina Peters' God-given liberty. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Frank.
Wow. I mean, he said it.
Yeah. I don't think we've realized how much we have been suppressed as a people. We're like the frog in hot water, it just slowly come to a boil. But where we can't speak our mind anymore, we have to change how we say things on social media to make sure that the social media gods don't shut us down. We're afraid if we speak out about a public official that they're going to use their authority to come after us. We're always we're carefully walking on eggshells, it feels like, at least. And I think the best way to combat this is to just be free, to just live free and speak your mind, and come what may. There's no other way to do it. I mean, unless we just want to cower back somewhere and go and hide and preserve our lives. But what is your life? What is any of our lives? And what good are they if we succumb to a tyrannical system where you can't have opinions anymore and you can't share publicly what those opinions are? Then what really is our life at that point? I don't know. Just a short time of self-preservation, not fighting for anything, and cowering back, trying to do whatever we can to save our life. I don't know.
I mean, that's what we've seen. That's what we've witnessed. That's why it's such an anomaly when you see courage and when you see high moral character in the judicial system, where you worked. How significant is that when you're talking about morals, morality, people living a good, pure life. How really important is that, do you think, truly? Because everybody's always like, well, what people do in their own bedroom or in their own private lives.
Yeah,
They're always saying stuff like that. What do you think?
yeah. The first time I started hearing stuff like that was about Bill Clinton when he was president, and he's a sexual predator in ways that most people can't even comprehend. I mean, the very, very tip of the iceberg were the adulteries and the disgusting things that he did with adults. Imagine the other things that he did and has done. And people were saying at the time, well, it's his private life, as if your private life doesn't affect your decisions. I mean, come on, you guys. And as if the things you do don't compromise you, both internally and externally. Like the things you do, the decisions you make in your personal life, on an internal basis, they sear your conscience. You cross certain lines in your life, and then the difference between right and wrong starts to become gray. And you see that in people that are committing, things that were like, oh well, okay, he cheated on his wife, or oh, okay, well, this that, and then the next thing you know, they're going down a path of more self-destruction. And the next thing you know, if it's an elected official, they're not voting conservative anymore, and they're compromising the decisions they're making because it internally affects them. But also the external effects are you begin to become compromised, and people begin to have dirt on you because you're not living a moral life. And then you do anything you can to make sure that that dirt doesn't get out. And
Yeah.
so then you become more controlled. And so that's why we were so, we're very aware of people that we elect and people that are in authority, people that are in government. Oftentimes, when they're doing crazy things, making crazy decisions, acting weird from the bench,
Mhm.
prosecuting people that they shouldn't be prosecuting, that kind of thing. Oftentimes, there's something in their personal life that's way off. Uh, Compromises in their own personal life, immoral things in their own personal life, stuff like that, where it's either compromised them on an internal or an external or both of those levels. And so, I mean, it's just the way it is. If we put people in office, and again, it's another reason why get in there for 2 years and get out, because we're sick
Yeah.
of people getting in there and becoming corrupted. And that's what happens. They go into the belly of the whale, and it stinks over there in DC. It's swampy and it's gross. And all of a sudden, before you know it, they're off smoking this or that, snorting this and that, having affairs with him or her, and who knows what else they're doing. That's only the stuff we see in public. And then they're not doing anything for people. All they're doing is taking money, living like parasites, and doing what's good for them. And so, yeah, to answer your question, it's really, really, really important that people in positions of authority and judicial and in positions of servanthood are elected officials. Bureaucrats that we never even elect there anyway that get appointed, if they're not living a moral lifestyle, it's all going to crumble. And I think that's a lot what we're seeing now in the system itself.
Well, we are going to take a quick break and then we're going to come back with one last sentencing speech that we're going to listen to. Jerry and Wendy Woods. You guys have asked about this a lot. I think sometimes that we've cleared the air on this finally, and then I realize we really haven't. If they seriously had the audacity to go to the sentencing and say the nonsense they said, be sure your sins will find you out. We're going to be right back right after this. All right, everybody, it's up to you. Your family is up to you. Their care and their protection is on you. So I want to give you a tool that can help you. With over 200,000 poisonings last year, we have a duty and an obligation to make sure we're protecting our kids. The overdoses are one thing, but when you are poisoned by fentanyl and have no knowledge of what is actually on the product you're about to consume, those things are unavoidable. So I want to introduce you to thefentanyltest.com. It is the first of its kind, a test that is 99%. It actually wanted to be 100, but the CDC won't allow that. Accuracy to determine whether or not there is fentanyl anywhere laced in the product that you're about to consume, from topical body products to any pill that you might be putting in your mouth. Don't forget the Tylenol scare. I'm not talking about illicit drugs. I'm talking about the daily things that we are consuming. You realize that the majority of our pharmaceuticals are coming from the CCP funded China. Okay. So everything that's coming into our country, largely now, over 90% of those products are coming from the CCP, from China. And we need to make sure that we're checking these things. We can't allow, I can't explain the heartache, the feeling of talking with mothers who have lost their children over things that I now know we could have done something about that. So please go to thefentanyltest.com. Go get a home test kit today. Have it on hand just in case and teach your children. We do not need any more children being poisoned by the open southern border and the flooding in of the CCP's demise of America through fentanyl poisoning. Every day you hear about it, it's time to do something about it. Thefentanyltest.com. Go check it out today. So we've been talking about the sentencing of Clerk Tina Peters and the difference. Really, Dr. Doug Frank laid it out beautifully, everything that happened. And what I really appreciated about that the most was the transparency, because we were never hiding anything. In fact, one of the things that probably got me in the most trouble was that I was so public. I was on social media all the time. I was on Facebook updating the people what was going on. I was talking with County Commissioner Janet Rowland. I was talking with GOP Chair Kevin McCartney. I was working with many volunteers in Mesa County. Just so many people, and letting them know what was going on. This is what's happening. This is what's going to be coming down the pipe. And of course, the Congresswoman included in all of that. And it got very interesting. It really did, what all happened. But the Jerry Wood situation has continued to be a thorn. Now, I'm curious. I want to hear your thoughts. Just a reminder that I did testify, and I specifically went to testify against the lie that Jerry Wood had spread, and the prosecution used him. Basically, he was their star witness. He was all they had, and they used him to propagate a lie. He committed perjury in that courtroom. He perjured himself. He lied. What is your take? Just kind of walk me through what you think, and then we're going to share their sentencing.
Well,
Statement.
in my view, it seems that the whole issue surrounded did he know that his key card was being used? I mean, that seems like that was really the whole issue. Did it happen behind his back where he had no idea what was going on, or was he aware, and did he give permission for his key card to be used? Now, somewhere along the line, I mean, I think we all know what the answer to that is. But somewhere along the lines, again, it's like, it seems to me, I mean, in my estimation, somehow, I mean, he got bad counsel. You already talked about that. How he went to an attorney that, is they're in the brotherhood, right? They're part of the clan.
Very much.
And I don't know. Obviously, he got counsel from that attorney. Probably something to the fact that he could be charged, and he would be given immunity if he just changes his tune and says what the prosecuting people want him to say. And also, I mean, it seems to me that sometimes people get compromised, and who knows? I mean, was there something found that could have come to light that he didn't want there to get out? I mean, they did search all of the stuff and things like that. And was he afraid of something getting out? That you just never know. Again, I don't know, but you just wonder. But what I do know is that his tune seemed to change from initially he wanted to be a part, wanted to do the imaging. Then he said, "Wait a second, I don't have the skill set to do the imaging." And then it was, "Well, can your key card be used to let someone in that can use it, that the clerk would approve?" And this all seems
Who had federal clearance.
Yeah, who had federal clearance, and it was proven, even with the very limited testimony for the defendant in court that the judge was just suppressing. It was proven that there was a group conversation in which Jerry Wood was involved, that he knew what was going on, and he approved of it. And he even wanted to go so much, he wanted to be at this cyber symposium, and Mike Lindell's symposium, so badly that, from what I understand, he booked his own hotel ticket, booked his own flight,
Yep.
Wanted to be there, wanted to kind of be part of this glory. He wanted to be interviewed by Lara Logan about
boy.
his work and all this. Wanted to have sort of that patriotic viewpoint of him, like, hey, I was willing to do this for my country, which, according to, I mean, he didn't do anything. except he wanted to do the imaging, wanted to be a part of it, but then wasn't because he didn't have the skill set to do it. Somebody else did it. They used his key card to access it and to do it, but he still wanted the glory for it. But then it was like, I want the glory, but I don't want any consequences to come with that glory. And the consequences, I think, were presented to him like, we'll potentially charge you with being a part of a co-conspirator, right? You were in this. And I don't know, like I said, I don't know. Maybe some things came out, maybe some things were found that shouldn't have been, he didn't want found and didn't want to be exposed in other areas. Hard to say, but his tune definitely changed. I think he wanted the glory of being the patriot involved and uncovering election fraud and being at the symposium, all that. He wanted to be there. He was there, but then he didn't want any consequences that potentially.
Oh, and he flew on Mike Lindell's plane. I love how Robert Shapiro didn't let anybody know that. He was begging to be in the film selection code, begging. We were at a lunch with Lara Logan, right? And he is asking us to call the attorneys to give him permission to speak, to be a part of the film. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, I don't know
what did
exactly.
you do?
I mean, I'm kind of being like, well, what would you say? Like, maybe you're going to talk, I don't know, maybe talk about how much he loves the country or whatever. I don't know. Or our elections. I don't know. I don't know.
Let me say this real quick. Let me say this real quick because I was at the Stanford Constitution meeting in, gosh, it must have been like May of 22 ish, somewhere around there.
Wait, hold that. Oh, never mind. We just did a break. I apologize. Sorry.
No, yeah.
Sorry.
And I was there, and where they talked, he and his wife got up there and talked, and he specifically said in that meeting, if I recall correctly, he specifically said that he was not a victim. And it's really interesting because my mind goes, either you were the victim, you did nothing wrong, and you were totally victimized, like your identity was stolen and you didn't know about it and you had nothing to do with it, or you're a hero that is a patriot and you did some amazing things for your country by allowing your ID card to be used and being a part of this whole conspiracy to expose any election fraud that was going on.
Mm-hmm.
But it can't be both. Like, which is it? Because if you're not the hero, then what did you do? And according to him, he did nothing. So why would he? So what did you do? Nothing. Or if you're the victim, then you can't also be the hero in this because you didn't do anything. And if you're a victim, then you obviously didn't know about anything happening with your ID. But that's not consistent with the evidence that was presented.
I, for one, would like to hear their sentencing statement, and I hope everybody's listening because the reality was that Jerry Wood committed no crime. That's true. Until he perjured himself and lied about his role, what he chose to do. That wasn't a crime, though. And I guess that's my point. Like, that's why it's so stupid. The whole thing is so silly. What he allowed to happen to himself is interesting. It didn't, again, you said it didn't need to be this way, but I'm very curious. I have not listened to their full statement. So let's listen together, shall we?
Family and as a private citizen of Mesa County, I'm very thankful to our law enforcement who have handled this case with honor and care. Thank you to the DA's office for your thorough and carefully executed investigation. And thank you to our Mesa County Commissioners, Janet Rowland, Cody Davis, and former Commissioner Scott McGinnis, who had to step up to help cover our clerk's office, and to the employees there who were left picking up the slack at a very stressful time 3 years ago. I have composed this statement in my head 50 different ways and with varying degrees of emotion.
Sorry, I just have to ask, was that part of the deal, the immunity deal, was that you had to brown nose every elected official in your sentencing statement? I'm just asking for a friend.
Nice to be in the club.
Over the past 3 years. I don't stand here today to be seen as a victim of Ms. Peters, although we were victimized by her. I stand here as someone who serves as a witness to the chaos, the injury, and the twisting of events that happened in Mesa County and in our lives, as well as using my voice to speak the truth because it truly does matter. As I stand here today in this courtroom, I am sad.
I'm sorry. I have one other question. Why is she giving the impact statement? How come
I don't
Jerry
know.
Wood hides behind his wife?
Well, he talks here in a minute, but
He does? Okay, okay,
yeah,
okay. I should
yeah,
look.
I have no idea. I don't know.
Sorry. Okay.
And that Miss Peters let it get to this point. I'm truly grieved to see this 68-year-old woman who often uses the name of God as her guide continue down this pathway of unrepentant and callous disregard toward anyone in authority without humility. I am grieved that Miss Peters did not stop at any of the red lights along the way and say, I'm in over my head. I made a mistake. Help. Instead, she took the bait, the idea of the feather in her cap, where the end justifies the means. Our family was the means. I am appalled that Sharona Bishop had no qualms about using Miss Peters, my husband, and others along the way, whom she treated as pawns to move around on her chessboard, also while using God as her coverall. God sees through Sharona Bishop, though, and he knows the truth, and may he judge rightly over her. I am utterly amazed that still to this day, after the trial, after the guilty verdict, after their own admission of guilt, neither one of these women have shown any remorse for the people they have victimized, nor offered any apology to anyone.
We have to pause. I'd love your perspective on that, if you don't mind. Wow.
Yeah, it's hard to know what like, and that's what the judge did later. With what he said later about Tina. It's like, you're not repentant, or I mean, what is it we're repenting of? Like, what exactly is it? I mean, she talked about using people as pawns. I don't understand the premise.
Mhm.
And they wanted to be involved. I don't know about
Begged,
her. I have no idea. I don't
begged.
know what she's talking.
All the text messages, all the calls, Jerry Wood, what can I
Yeah,
do to help? How can I help? Oh, by the way, we're doing all this tech stuff. If you ever need anything, oh, we're looking at voter rolls. I don't even know what the heck they were talking about. I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I don't
yeah.
know.
I
I'm amazed. What
Jerry
state
wanted to be
he
involved.
when he
Like
would?
he was. Yeah, it doesn't. So there's a lot of it's very emotional, um, obviously, and I guess that's where my confusion is at. Is first of all, I've heard them myself say. I heard them say they're not victim. He's not a victim. And then his desire to be involved, his desire to go to the cyber symposium. He was all about Lindell at that time. Obviously, wanting to fly on the private jet, and his desire to say, "Sure, yeah, let's take the imaging." The only reason he didn't was because he said he didn't have the skill set to do it. And so what happened was an attorney got a hold of them, fear got a hold of them, in my estimation, and then probably something else too, to
Hmm.
where they needed to fully comply. So it's odd, but whatever.
It's amazing to me because they did feel the impact of the federal government. They were raided not once but twice.
Yeah.
They had all of their stuff taken from them, and yet they've pointed their vitriol at Clerk Peters. It's very strange to me. Jerry Wood was the one that said everybody needs to get burner phones. He was the one instructing on that. Jerry flew home on Lindell's plane with no qualms about it. He was the only one of us that was even going to go to the symposium. I had no interest in any of that. I just wanted to figure out what happened in this municipal election because I could see the 15-minute city that was coming, which, by the way, is in play in Grand Junction, Colorado. I mean, this is an interesting speech. Let's hear more.
I grieve for the people who are deceived and follow a woman who changes her version of the truth every time she goes on air. Truth matters, Miss Peters, the actual truth. I have grieved for our public servants, our elected officials, including clerks across this state, and the private citizens who truly care about election integrity, who uphold the rule of law, who have had to endure ridicule and public slander. I am sickened that death threats have been leveled at some of the people in this courtroom here today. Has Miss Peters denounced any of those? I have grieved for our children, 3 of whom are in this courtroom today, who endured the shock and trauma of having our homes searched for hours on 2 separate occasions, which resulted in the loss of our computers, tablets, and phones, most of which have yet to be returned to this day. I carried the heartache of the concern they had that their stepfather could go to prison. I have hated that Miss Peters and Miss Bishop had betrayed so many of my friends, some of which were friends with both of them at one point. Personally, I endured a public filleting where accusations were pointed at me and lies were spoken about me and my family in a political forum, including the insane idea that we were working covertly with the FBI. As a pastor, I had to
Yeah, well, join the club on that one. At some time or another, anyone dealing in politics, I guess, is going to be accused of that. So,
explain to our congregation why our names would be in the news and the public scrutiny that we and possibly our ministry would be under. Some of our congregants are here today showing their love and support. I have grieved the most for my husband. Jerry is one of the most honest people I have ever met. He passionately loves this country and is deeply burdened by the concern for our country's elections, that they be conducted with honesty and integrity. It was both shocking and heartbreaking to me to hear Miss Peters and Miss Bishop slanderously use Jerry's name to destroy his reputation in national and local interviews, simply because they saw him as a tool rather than a human. Miss Peters claimed to have no knowledge of.
I just want to clarify something. Was this before or after Jerry and Wendy Wood went on CNN and said they were victims, that Tina Peters had stolen his identity? Because I never spoke about them until then, until they did the CNN interview and they lied. Never talked about him. Because again, I really didn't think he'd done much. I didn't think it was worth talking about him. And I think too, your experience was he had said already, and it's documented, that he wasn't a victim. So, I mean, he was taking responsibility for what he chose to do. What do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely they had to take. I feel like they thought they were in a position where they had to take one side or the other, and I think they jumped ship quick out of fear because it felt a lot more safe to just be on the other side. And to me, I hear fear in their voice,
Mhm.
fear in their voices, and they're thanking everybody, all the elected officials, all this stuff. I get that. That it boils to me back down to the simplicity of what are they so upset with Tina and you and others about? Like, why are you so upset? I know I know that there's been names called and things like that. I never heard you call anybody names. I heard you call them out when they decided, well, I mean, Jerry, his wife is speaking for him and all this stuff, but when Jerry Wood decided to go publicly and say that his identity was stolen, and he literally was saying, I knew nothing else. He didn't talk about him flying over to the symposium, being with Mike Lindell, being in the group conversations where he was using a different name, which fine, I don't care about that, but I understand. But he didn't talk about any of that stuff. He was in the conversations about his ID being used,
Mhm.
and that was that. It seems to me was proven during the trial. So it's just it's sad what's happened, and I feel like they were in a place where they felt like out of fear or for some other reason they just had to take a different side and go with it.
All right, well, let's finish listening.
Of ever meeting Jerry, but later changed her story to claim my husband was in on this ridiculous scheme from the beginning. The implication that my husband would willingly hand over his life, sacrificing his family, our ministry, his livelihood to someone he had barely met made me sick.
I'm going to pause for a second because this is important. Robert Shapiro stopped me from saying exactly what Jerry Wood had said at the Cyber Symposium after he met Conan Hayes. I felt kind of sorry for him, and I was looking at him. This is what I testified to. This is under oath. And I said, Jerry, I'm really sorry that nobody's ever going to know the contribution that you made to these images being made, to that effect. And he looked at me and he said, anything for my country. What's interesting here is Wendy is really collaborating that. This man loves his country. He's worried about election security, and he felt that this was what he could contribute to securing our nation. And I believe that. I believe that about him. I think that he absolutely saw this as his opportunity to help save the country, to be fighting for a future for his kids, all of those things. Nobody's ever questioned that, except now she is. Now she's trying to act like he never did any of that, never said any of that. I didn't buy a ticket for the symposium. Jerry Wood did. And this is months after the trusted build. He did. He saw himself on a national scale, not me. I was at home. I had no intention of going until Dr. Frank made arrangements for us to fly there because I didn't have any money. So anyway, I
Story
think
of
it's
her life.
I think it's interesting the way she's framing this to get as much sympathy as possible for her husband. He's not out of the woods yet. Didn't mean to make a joke there, but he's not, because he lied. And the evidence shows that he lied. Wendy, I'm sorry, your husband's lying to you, or you are in partnership with a lie. You guys are collaborating together, or he didn't tell you the truth. And I'm sorry, you should ask for the evidence from the Signal chat. Sorry, I read it in the courtroom under oath.
Yeah, and I think it's well said. I think we need to. I have another
Yeah.
obligation I have to get to, but
Well,
there's a
and
lot
actually,
more.
yeah, we are at a hard stop too again. So I want to thank everybody. Thank you for coming on. I know there's so much more. You're going to be sharing more on your own, on our own lives over on the other social media outlets. But I think it's just important to remember to, in all of this, we have a woman here who did what was right. She's been sentenced to 9 years in prison, consecutive sentence. And at the end of the day, these people that we just heard from, they were at the center of this. They became the state's witness against Tina Peters. That vitriol you hear is what ended up being the hammer that gave them the justification to put her in prison for 9 years. So I think it
Yeah.
does matter a lot
And
what they've
I'll
said
also
and done.
say a couple things, just kind of on that note, just a couple things really quickly. That's that we've all been slandered and gossiped about and been lied about. You guys, we could literally spend, Sharon and I could spend hours talking about it. We could name names and all that stuff, all the gossip. Probably some of them are watching right now. The lies and gossip. So it's just par for the course. I'm not trying to, we're not victims of it. It's just what happens. Tina also has been slandered, threatened. I mean, I didn't see Tina getting up there being a victim about her life being threatened. All of us have experienced that, and that's what happens when you put your neck out for your country and you don't acquiesce and you don't give in, you don't cave. And so that's happened. But to many of you who stood by, not knowing exactly what was going on, because we're talking more now, there's so many things we still really cannot talk about or bring up or whatever. But I appreciate those of you who haven't jumped to conclusions, who haven't gotten into the gossip, especially in Colorado. There's a real spirit of division in Colorado in the conservative and Republican party over there. A lot of lies, a lot of gossip. I mean, the vitriol is unbelievable what it is. I mean, and Toras and others and all kinds of things. So we appreciate you guys having integrity. And Sharon and I are open books. Many of you know how to contact us. You can contact us on Facebook. Many of you have our phone number. Just call and ask us. Just call and talk to us about it instead of getting into the gossip and it feels good, pretend like you know something and then start spreading rumors about people and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So
Tickling of the
hopefully
ears.
we can help you smooth that out. But
Well, I appreciate you. Thank you for taking this time because, again, this is firsthand accounts of being there, watching it happen, understanding the players, knowing what was going on, and also recognizing that what Kyle Clark for a change is right from Channel 9 News. It is shocking that Clerk Peters was sentenced to 9 years in prison for any of this, that she was charged. Sentenced to this is just, it's unconscionable. So thank you so much. I appreciate you. All right, everyone. Well, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you for being with us on America's Mom. Remember, all that is necessary for evil to prevail is for good men and women to do absolutely nothing. We'll see you back here again.